Thanks for listening to the AfterWord. I am joined here by Betty and Kirsten and Mustache. What do you think of that? You don't like that?
His middle name is Michael, Mustache Michael.
I think you're just saying it out of jealousy, Eric. Because I remember the time that you tried.
There was a time years ago in the church that the guys decided to all the men in the church decided to grow a mustache and
beard. It was a beard.
Oh, was it beard?
Yeah, full beard.
No shave November. I think.
Was Eric. It was rough. It was.
I don't participate in those. That's like
you
getting
did,
picked
though.
for a team on the playground and being last picked. When it comes to facial hair, I'm last almost every time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was real bad. It came in little patches here and there. I still remember it.
So
I
that
have
was
pictures
before
if
my
anybody's
time.
interested.
What?
So bad.
But what you lack in facial hair, you make up for in muscles.
Yeah, and being strapping, as we learned last week.
Mm-hmm. You are a strapping young lad.
Thanks for bringing that up.
You're welcome.
This is the AfterWord. Our actual goal with this podcast is to look at the text that was just preached some more and also see what the glory of God that we can discover in the text. And so that is what we're going to do. But before we do that, I have an intro question unknowingly submitted by a friend of mine. And this is the intro question. If you produced misfortune cookies, what would some of the misfortunes say? So if you made misfortune cookies, you took that little wrapper out, what would it say?
How was it unknowingly submitted?
Well, we weren't talking about the podcast. It was just kind of a funny thing my friend said. I said, no, that would actually work really well as an intro question. So we'll see if it works well or not.
I mean, it would definitely contain unlucky numbers.
Yes.
Yeah, but I wouldn't say that. I would tell people that here's your lucky numbers for the day.
But
they were.
they're
I know they're actually the unlucky ones.
So that's like, what is it? Forcing misfortune onto people. Then. So that's a whole nother level of misfortune.
Yeah, that's
Deceptive cookies.
Deceptive cookies.
Deception cookies.
Well, maybe we should start here. What does a fortune cookie normally say? What kind of things are inside?
It has a learn Chinese word on it.
Oh, yeah.
Does it?
Yeah, so the word on it could say it's one thing, but it's actually like a potty word.
I wonder how many people have gotten tattoos of their fortune and it's actually just a potty word.
That's funny. But like a fortune cookie might say something like, in your near future, you will stumble across success.
Fortune.
A relationship.
Relationships
always
coming your way.
It's always positive, I think. Like it's always like something good is coming your way.
Or it makes no sense.
Yeah, that's true.
Like what?
I don't know. I feel like I've gotten some like, what does this mean? And then I throw it away.
And mine would have unlucky numbers, but they would just say lucky numbers.
Yeah.
And then it would also say something like, the flu is coming your way.
That's a misfortune for sure. Pain and suffering are in your near future.
Yeah.
You're going to get COVID-19.
And it came true, right?
You will have a failed relationship.
Oh, that one really hurts a little bit, which is probably true, though, for everybody. It's going to happen.
The relationship you're currently in will not go well.
Yeah.
The date you're on and have received this fortune cookie will not end well.
It's actually just Debbie Downer cookies.
Yeah, that's right.
Wah, wah.
Yeah, the project you're working on will never be completed.
You just ate dog. That's what mine would say.
That's a misfortune.
Yeah. Yeah.
Bethany, what about you? Any come to mind?
That's a good one right there.
I don't know if I can top that. All I could think of was like basically what everyone was saying. Like, you have no friends or something.
Just statement.
Your friends are fake.
Like at some line, it's just insults, right?
Yeah.
Now it's just offending me, this little cookie.
When we lived in Chicago, we always had to take the tollway, and it was during the time where you'd throw change into the thing.
Yeah.
You'd throw it into the little bucket, and the arm would raise, and a little green light would pop up that would say, thank you. And we always thought it would be funny if they somehow made it that it gave you a real message about your life. Like the arm came up, but it actually told you something about your life.
Like either a little fortune or a little just helpful piece of advice.
Yeah.
Somebody needs to invent that then.
Yeah.
Maybe that's our calling. I'm going to move on.
Oh, I've got
Let's
a lot.
do that.
I got a lot of things I can tell people.
All right. We finished up 1 Samuel chapter 2 on Sunday. Vince, give us a recap.
Comes on the heels of Hannah's prayer after committing to the Lord that she would give Samuel or give their child if they had one. And then it starts right out. The verses we started out with were Now the sons of Eli were worthless. And so it talks through the sons of Eli who have taken over the priesthood, not by force, but because Eli's old and failing, his two sons have taken over as the priests. And throughout the passage, it says priest servants or the men or priests. Many people think it's all referring to the two sons, Hophni and Phinehas. So they take over and they require of the people from the sacrifices the meat that they are offering. And it's going against what's explicitly stated in Leviticus chapter 7, other places in the law about how the priest should take meat from the sacrifices. So they're requiring of the people something different than what God is requiring of the people. And they do it by force. They say, if you don't do this, then we will take it by force. So you must, even though people are trying to correct them, they go and take it by force. I'm going to jump ahead. After that, we also find out that Eli knows about their sin, their inappropriate relations with women who are in service to the place of worship. So there's inappropriate relationships there. Eli knows about it, calls them on it. The reason I jump ahead is to say that these two brothers are in serious sin in places of authority in the work that God has called them to be about, and inserted into those two places of darkness are the shining lights of who Samuel is. And it talks about how Samuel was there to minister to the Lord, and his parents had left him there for that purpose. His parents would come and visit as they brought up the sacrifices year after year. So they're inserted into this dark story to give us a piece of light and to show us an example of what God is requiring. And then the very end, which we didn't read yesterday, but I gave a summary of, the prophet comes, the unnamed prophet comes to Eli and gives him the word from God about the rejection of their family line as being priests. So this goes all the way back, and the prophet talks about it, goes all the way back to Aaron. Aaron was the first priest back in Exodus, and from his line were all of the priests, the Levite priests that would come from that line. And so this is a big change for the people of God to have a different line of people be the priests, which we'll see in the coming weeks where that shifts and goes a different direction for the line of priests. So there's this rejection from God of Eli and his family because of the sin that they knowingly dive into.
There is a lot here. But before I ask those questions, I want to see if there's anything from your study, Vince, that maybe didn't make it into the sermon that you thought was interesting, or maybe gives a fuller picture of anything here in this text.
Yeah, the only thing that came to mind that I didn't have a lot of time to talk through, or I didn't take any time yesterday to talk through, is if you go back to the beginning of chapter 2 and read Hannah's prayer, this psalm, this song that is listed there, you can almost pick that psalm up and place it over what we see in the last part of chapter 2 and in the coming weeks. So it's prophetic almost from Hannah about what is to come, where she talks through all of the ways in which God has been present, and God is going to fight against his enemies, and God is going to bring retribution. So you can almost place that over the top of what we're seeing in these weeks there.
Is there anything specific that we saw here in the rest of chapter 2 you're thinking of?
Yeah, so my eye just caught it. Verse 10, the adversaries of the Lord shall be broken to pieces. Against them he will thunder in heaven. The Lord will judge the ends of the earth. He will give strength to his king and exalt the horn of his anointed. The anointed is picked up again at the end of chapter 2. So there's a lot of places that they'll go hungry. There's a place at the very end that the rejection of Eli and his sons talks about them. Sorry, I can't turn my page here. If somebody's there and sees it, there it is. Talks about how they will be hungry and be lacking bread. So there's a lot of places, and we'll see it in the coming weeks too, where Hannah's psalm, her prayer, is is almost prophetic of what is to come.
Yeah, thanks for that. I want to start here with the first question. This is one of the biggest questions that popped out to me when I originally read this. This is down in verse 25, so about halfway through this text. Verse 25 says, this is Eli rebuking his sons. Eli says, if someone sins against a man, God will mediate for him, but if someone sins against the Lord, who could intercede for him? And then the narrator says this, but they, being those sons, but they would not listen to the voice of their father, for it was the will of the Lord to put them to death. As I read through it, it sure seemed like it was something similar to what God did with Pharaoh, hardening Pharaoh's heart because God had other intentions on how to use him and what God wanted to do. It sounded similar to that, but from hearing what you said yesterday, you had a completely different take on what verse 25 meant or what the author was getting at.
Yeah, and that's only through different study that I had done. That's how it strikes me too on first read. That's how it strikes me as well. But as you look into it further and see also what's coming up and how these two sons and also Eli die, the sort of gist of what is happening there is that last part, but they would not listen to the voice of their father. For, that word for is important. For it was the will of the Lord to put them to death. That for is actually pushing us forward into what we now know as the reader outside of the story. We know what is going to happen because we've read ahead. That's the assumption. And so it's the author's way of saying they wouldn't listen to the voice of their father. And as you know, it was God's will that they would die because of that. So it was a pushing forward to what was going to happen. It wasn't God was going to harden their heart and make an example of them. This was a choice they made, and the consequence of that choice was death. The consequence of all of our sin is death, and that will be meted out by the Lord. And we see that in chapter 4. Eli dies and his sons as well.
So rather than God having these two sons not respond with repentance, the author is saying something like God will be faithful to be just or execute the just punishment on their sin.
Yeah, and we'll see it coming,
Yeah, okay. Huh. We didn't talk about this earlier, Vince, but I had a question about this one too. So it kind of puts you on the spot. And then we'll stop with like the Bible answer man kind of thing. But where was this? This was in the part we did not read, but you summarized. Oh, here it is. So this is God speaking through this unnamed prophet. And God says in verse 30, therefore the Lord, the God of Israel, declares, I promised that your house, being Aaron's priestly line, I promised that your house and the house of your father should go in and out before me forever. But now the Lord declares, far be it from me, for those who honor me I will honor, and those who despise me shall be lightly esteemed. On first reading, it seems like God's going back on a promise that he made, and that now he's saying, I promised that, but now I'm going to break it. Did you in your study flesh that out at all a little bit? Did I say it right? Flesh?
You did say it right.
It felt wrong.
It felt dirty, didn't it?
Yeah, it did a little bit.
Verse 30, therefore the Lord, the God of Israel, declares, I promised, past tense, that your house and the house of your father should go in and out before me forever. But now the Lord declares, far be it from me, for those who honor me I will honor, and those who will despise me shall be lightly esteemed. And this is one of those situations. By the way, I'll say this. I didn't study that in depth. So what I'm about to say is not necessarily about this specifically, but it's one of those situations, I think, that we have to start with what we do know is absolutely true, and that is that God is sovereign over all things, that he doesn't change his mind, and that what he wills will happen. Therefore, it must be that we are unable to understand or comprehend, or it was hidden in some way, it was mysterious in some way, what God had promised to begin with. Does that make sense? So that's kind of a weak answer to that question. But I think instead of saying, well, look, it's God going back on his word, we have to start with what we know is true, and God does not do that. What he promises, he upholds. Therefore, we've got to figure it out from the angle of this is who God is.
So rather than God's character being questioned, we need to figure out, are we understanding
Yeah.
this right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there something hidden or mysterious in the way that it was written or in the way that God had communicated it that we are unable to comprehend fully?
Yeah. Yeah, I only looked quickly. Our township was talking about this a little bit. I only looked quickly to see where I could find God's original promise to Aaron and what that promise was, if it was conditional or unconditional. But I never found it. It's not saying it's not there, but that's just a quick skim. So unfortunately, that doesn't help the conversation at all.
Yeah. I can look into that and do a little research on that verse specifically.
Yeah, I'm curious. It could have been something conditional too. Okay, so yeah, this passage is so interesting, but I want to open it up here with all of us. This is really broad. From the text that we saw yesterday, what stuck out? Like, is there something that sticks with you? Either it was challenging or it was applicable or it pushed you in some way from this text?
I think something I have written in my notes was that Elkanah and Hannah knew Eli and his sons, and they had open hands, and they trusted God with their boy. And one of the questions Vince asked yesterday was, am I willing to trust that God will take care of my children in this world? And I think that's really hard for me, especially right now, having lost a son and feeling like God. I know God took care of his soul, and that's really the only promise that we have, but it's hard for me to trust that God's going to care for my children in a way that I want them to be cared for. So for me, it's constantly going back to the knowledge that the promises that we have in Scripture are often promises for our souls and not for our bodies. And so trusting that God will care for my children's souls, even knowing that their bodies may be harmed in the midst of that.
One thing that I thought of that it wasn't exactly, or we didn't really talk about it yesterday, but it came to mind on my first reading of the text, but just how through the sons, like, forsaking the system God had put in place, they were also forsaking proper worship of the Lord for like their own comfort and for their own gain. And it just made me think a lot about just like in my own life, what does like forsaking proper worship of the Lord for my own comfort look like? And that's come to my heart a lot through fasting, like over just these past months, and just what it looks like to want to give up really giving myself to him in that way because I'm hungry or because I want to be satisfied in a certain thing. But that's like something that came to mind to me that was not totally linked to yesterday's sermon, but just to the passage in general.
I think I wrote something down similar to that, Betty, that they did not like God's scenarios, so they set up their own. And one of the things I read about this passage is that Hophni and, I want to say Phineas because it's like Phineas and Ferb, but it's Phineas.
You can say it however you'd like.
Okay, P-Dog, Hophni and P-Dog.
We call Betty.
That's true. But anyway, that they didn't follow the rules of what God had laid out in Leviticus 7. And it's speculation, but one of the reasons could be that they just preferred the meat cooked a different way. And so they didn't want the meat boiled. They wanted it grilled.
I don't want it boiled either.
I
for
know,
the record.
boiled meat is nasty.
Yeah.
It's like a boiled hot dog versus a grilled one.
But even that is that God had laid out, this is what's best. This is the process that I want you to do, whether or not you like it or you prefer it. And their preferences drove their actions. And just thinking, how often do we do that in worship? Here, especially in America, when we have such a consumeristic society, like how often do our preferences drive the way that we choose to worship because it feels better or it tastes better or whatever it is? Like, how often is it that I'm completely blind to the fact that the worship of God has become about my preferences rather than about God himself?
What was your original question?
What hit you from this text? Something that challenged you. And so from your study, what challenged your heart or encouraged your heart in this text?
I think for me, it was just the seriousness of sin and in some ways the apathy of the dad. I mean, that hit me. I think I can tend to have moments where things hit me, and I think this is not right. This needs to change about my own heart and about my parenting, me directing our boys and helping them see what is pleasing to God. And there are also moments where I'm tired and, with all sin, right? Where I'm tired and don't want to fight it in my own heart. And I'm also tired and don't want to fight it in the hearts of my boys. And so to see the destruction that has the potential to lead to, I think hit me. And that came out some in the application I gave even in the sermon of, are we taking the opportunities that we have to speak what we know is true to the children that God's entrusted to us right now? That hit me. The reason that I had to ask the question again is because I was doing a little research on your other question.
Did you find anything?
Yeah.
out?
So here, quickly. So there is a statute or a promise from God. We see it both in Exodus 27 and in Exodus 29, where he tells Aaron, and you'll be the priest, and the line of priests will come from you, and this will be my statute forever. So there is a promise there. I think what verse 30 is saying is you, Eli, personally. Because he says, I promise that your house and the house of your father should go in and out before me forever. But now, the Lord declares, far be it from me, for those who honor me I will honor. So people like Aaron and the line of priests who honor God, he will honor and follow through with that. For those who dishonor him, it's a breach of that promise. Therefore, his carrying through of that is no longer, he's not bound to that.
So Eli's house was a branch of the larger house of Aaron.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that Zadok
Yeah.
is probably who the text is referring to as the one that they're going to raise up that will be faithful.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that Zadok and his family is still in the line of Aaron. Is that true? Or
No,
is it completely
it switches
different?
lines. Yeah, it switches lines.
Well, it's not from Aaron at all. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a huge change.
Yeah, and Solomon is the one who declares that that's the priest.
Huh.
I think it's later in 2 Samuel somewhere-ish.
Huh.
Is that helpful?
Yeah, we're going to get there.
Could
We'll
be
see.
third. Could be 3 Samuel.
Yeah.
We don't know.
Should we just go back and talk about how egregious these sins were?
Yeah.
It's a little startling, and that's probably the point of the text, to be a little bit startling of what they were doing. They were doing priestly duties, and they weren't even Christian, so to speak, in today's language.
Well, let's pause with each statement, though. They were doing things that God had set up in his word that had to be followed.
Yeah.
They decided, and they were respected men, right? If you come to the place of worship with a sacrifice year after year, and it's a line of people who God has ordained to be there, the assumption is, I think, and rightly so, these are trusted men. These are respected men. And they've completely turned that upside down and taken it into their own hands. So, I mean, you start to think through all of the dominoes that fall from their sin. It's wild to consider. I think that's why names Hannah and Elkanah are able to, open their hands and release. These are men that should be trusted, and hopefully God deals with them well, and so they trust to do that. But there's a lot here that they just go directly against. And even I thought about this some this week. They even had people who told them. So I picture this. This is probably not the way it is, but this is the first picture that comes to mind. We're all in line going up to take communion. And that's what's happening here. All the families are in line with their sacrifices. And one of them is like, hey, hold on. That's not the way we're supposed to be doing it. And they're like, yeah, but we're doing it this way. And if you're not going to do it, then we'll just rip it out of your hands and do it anyway. Mm-hmm. They were being corrected, and still they chose not to do it that way. So it wasn't just we sinned, whoops. It was, no, we sinned, we knew it, we were even corrected, and we chose to do it even more.
And the text is clear. They don't even have a relationship with God.
Yeah, they do not know the Lord.
Yeah, and so I'm assuming that means that maybe there wasn't the conviction of the Spirit around their sin, or maybe they just didn't care. I was thinking, well, so how did they justify all that in their own minds? But maybe they didn't care to justify it. It's just that's what they were going to do.
Well, I mean, I think we see in chapter 1, even with Eli, that there is a cynicism in him. Like when Hannah's in distress and praying, and he accuses her of being drunk. And like his immediate assumption of her was something really negative. And so you can see from the very beginning, like there's a hardness to Eli and a cynicism that's in there. And then that bleeds into his kids as well. And so, I think one of the things when God tells Eli, I'm going to kill both of your sons on the same day and you're going to die as well. Like he is breaking a family generational sin pattern right there by ending the family generation altogether. He says, you're not going to be around. There's not going to be any old men anymore. And so you see from the very beginning that Eli is, just a cynical man who maybe loved the Lord and yet also was hardened.
And even that cynicism, though, I'm not trying to just give credit where credit's not due, but even that cynicism is understandable because of what their generations have gone through. A judge is brought up to relieve the people of the conflict that they're in. They have a time of peace, and here we go again. So, and this is the priest who's mediating between the people and God over and over. And so, of course, he's got this like, what are we doing? Here we go again. We're in the same pattern. So it's understandable if what we're seeing in the text is cynicism. I think that's also understandable.
What a picture of the effects of sin, though, too. Because you're right, we're coming off the heels of the judges. And so all the back and forth, all the mess in all of Israel through the time of the judges. And then here we've got a couple of sons of a priest who's doing some egregious acts. So either it's the deceitfulness of sin or desensitizing or whatever it is, absolutely egregious acts being done. And yet it's still happening I'm assuming this is for years. I don't know how long this was happening, but is for a while, enough so the word could get out and that this was known among these people. And then it starts to affect Eli, like you two, Kirsten and Vince just mentioned. And so sin is getting its way into hearts, into lives, and what we are doing in ways that I am assuming for Eli, he's desensitized to it somehow. I don't know how else you be the priest and those things are happening and there isn't something more than the soft rebuke that we see here.
Yeah, and I wonder, to put it in terms for us, I wonder if it's just the distance that they feel from God, meaning they had this nearness to God in the wilderness, that he was present. It was visibly present. There would be seasons where through the cloud or through smoke or through a burning bush or whatever it was, he was visibly present. And even then, the Israelites complained that they didn't have it good like they had it in Egypt. And so there's this growing distance from what they experience as the presence of God. And I wonder if there are seasons like that for Eli, who see a judge come, it's faded away. Now we're in a season where a judge is not there, so they're not feeling the effects of this redeemer, so to speak, to relieve them of what's going on. There's this distance away from the nearness of God, like what we experience. I think the further away we get from God, either through how we're experiencing it or how we're putting ourselves in a place where we are distancing ourselves from God. When that happens, I think then we are desensitized to the sin that's around us. So the further and further away we get from God, or at least how we experience it, the less and less we care about holiness.
Yeah, and I mean, the effects of sin are the same today, aren't they, as they were back then? So even my own heart, I can relate a bit. The sin that is there, I get comfortable with. I can justify all day long. It's not so bad, or this is why, or that, if I'm conscious enough about it. So I can relate at least to a degree of what maybe was happening with Phinehas and Hophni and Eli. But this is so over the top. And we see it all the way through Scripture, which makes me understand, I think, a little bit why the Pharisees do what they do. All the extra rules to try to stay away from the legalistic sense from sinning, because they've seen all through the history what happens when they sin, right? They're conquered or whatever else happens over and over and over again.
So it becomes about the doing. Okay, so we need more. Clearly, we can't do this on our own, so we need more laws. And if we can't find them, we'll make them, and we'll create more restrictions for us to keep us on a more and more narrow path, so that we know for sure that we're headed in the right direction. Eventually, that flips upside down, and it becomes something that we're creating for ourselves. And then we forget, oh wait, what's right? I don't even know what's right anymore.
Yeah, trying to corral the activities of, say, Hophni and Phineas by lots and lots of rules.
Yeah.
It was wrong-headed, as we've seen. But I kind of get it a little bit, because these stories are littered throughout the Old Testament.
Yeah.
I don't know how I got there, but this is how I got there. Personally, that's how the text hit me. It was the gravity of sin and look at my own life. Because you had mentioned, Vince, when we look at especially Phineas and Hophni, and how God's standards for those who lead the church are extremely high, and to lead by example. And so I think about that. Like, if the church saw on display what I'm doing or thinking or whatever it is, like, in some ways it could feel, and it does feel, because it's sin, right? Sin is sin, in a dirty sort of Hophni and Phineas sort of way. And I think that's a healthy thing to be sensitive to, as well as none of our elders are perfect, but hopefully there's a quick confession and a conviction there.
Right, and I think that's what we don't see in them. We see a justification, a defense. We even see by force they will do what they want to do. When correction was brought to them, they turned it back around. So I wrote some of these things down for my sermon and ended up taking them out just because I didn't want to muddy it too much. But in the sermon, I'll say it here, because we can delete this podcast. But I was trying to think of examples of what this would look like today. And so one of the thoughts was, let's say we have Richard, because he's the most likely to do this. We have Richard stand by the offering box. And as people are coming and putting their offering in the offering box, Richard is saying to them, hey, make sure to write that check out to Richard, and I'll just take that from you here. Right? I'm trying to think through, like, what does this look like for us today? It's a very different thing, because the priesthood was very different than what we currently have. But here's a man, Richard, he's a respected guy in the church. We trust him. He's older, wiser. We look up to him, and he's taking his position of authority and using it to get what he wants out of the situation. I know that all breaks down to some extent, but these are things that I think over time we just begin to rationalize and justify. By the way, not that Richard would ever stand by the offering box and do that. Maybe. Richard, do you have anything to confess?
Yeah.
But yeah, what would be a good example of that today?
Of today?
I'm gonna
power.
I'm gonna put you all on the spot.
Yeah, some sort of abuse of power.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have an example, but I think it's any time your role of serving God becomes more about serving yourself and fulfilling your own ambition more than serving God. And I think it's a constant battle of laying down what you feel like you deserve, or what your rights are, or what you desire a lot of the time. And laying that down for what God says is best and what's most glorifying to Him. And so I think, Hophni and Phinehas were all about self-satisfaction and self-gratification. I mean, we see that in the way that they're using the women in the temple for their own gain and comfort and profit. They're using the meat to, prepare it the way they want it. Everything about their quote-unquote ministry was for their own self-edification.
Yeah, no, and also identity. I think that's probably where it goes now with those who are involved in leadership positions, who are using their leadership for something, probably less about the physical something and more about the what kind of identity will this give me? how will this promote my ego in some way?
Or my name.
Yeah,
Or my,
right.
Make me famous or whatever it is.
Man, it's so twisted, but we do it.
Yeah.
We do it today, twisting ministry or the church to our own ends.
Which is why it's so shocking in this text when Samuel is inserted. Like the pieces of it's so shocking to see, man, this is such horrible sin, and yeah, we do it as well. And here's Samuel.
So it's not a hopeless text.
I think the thing that you pointed out yesterday, that the sin of the young men was very great in the sight of the Lord in 2:17, and then the boy Samuel was very great in the presence of the Lord, 2:21. And I think what stood out to me is the fact that Samuel's position was the thing that made him great. He was in the presence of the Lord. And so the men were in the sight of the Lord, meaning God saw what they were doing, but positionally they were not near to God. Yeah. Whereas Samuel was near to him in his spirit, in his heart, in his mind, and his willingness to serve the Lord. And so positionally where we are with the Lord affects our greatness, and our greatness is completely flowing out of our nearness to God.
There you go. I said it yesterday in passing, but the verse 26, now the boy Samuel continued to grow both in stature and in favor with the Lord and also with men. It's word for word of what is spoken of Jesus. I think it's Luke. I'm trying to get there quickly. 2:52, when Jesus is presented at the temple, it says, and Jesus increased in wisdom and in stature and in favor with God and man. So almost the same wording is used of Jesus when Jesus is presented at the temple by his parents, or he stays at the temple by his parents. He's growing. So it's a shocking turnaround of the events from the two brothers to Samuel. And I think it just highlights our need. Jesus in the temple was speaking to these men who were priests who would have known it all, so to speak. And Jesus was increasing in wisdom and in stature, both in the sight of God and of man. He was growing to be more like his father. It's a shocking turnaround.
Well, and I think it's evidence that simply because someone was raised in an environment doesn't necessarily mean that that's the fruit they're going to bear. And I was thinking of this yesterday, especially with parents who've been really faithful and who've raised their kids in godly Christian homes, and right now their kids have turned or walked away, and just thinking someone can be raised in an incredibly godly environment, and yet still it's the Lord who calls them. And in this case, Samuel was raised in an incredibly ungodly environment, and yet God called him. And so I think maybe just as encouragement to parents that yes, I think you're charged to parents of courage and of boldness in addressing their kids is good and right, and yet also understanding that it's not necessarily that a parent has lacked courage and boldness, and that's why their kid has walked away. That there's not a one-to-one.
Yeah, it's absolutely true, but at the same time, it doesn't give parents license to not say anything.
Of course.
Yeah,
of
I
course.
know that's not what you're saying.
Just trying to bring some grace into that too, and just that their parents are heartbroken.
Yeah, I was having this conversation with someone last night who brought this point up, and we have kids about the same age, and we were just sharing how thankful we are that God is the one who's doing the work, because both we can do all of the right things and our kids can walk away from God, and we can do all of the wrong things and God can still grab a hold of their hearts. And that just gives a ton of freedom to parenting, that we walk faithfully and humbly with God and try to point our children to Jesus more and more. But it takes the pressure off knowing that God's the one who's doing the work.
So there's a proverb that's probably coming to people's minds. Proverb 22:6. It says this: train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it.
Oh, so it is 1-to-1.
Well, yeah, but I think this is often used as a battering ram for parents or parents who have kids who are not faithful. This can feel like a dagger through the heart. How do we think about this? Proverbs 22:6, in light of the truth that you just walked through, right? God is the one who does it.
Yeah. So to paraphrase the proverb, you train your children in the things of God. When they get older, that's who they're going to follow.
Yep.
Okay.
I mean, I think as Christians, one of the pitfalls that we often all fall into is we look for formulas and we look for rules and we look for how-tos. And so, so if I train my children according to what God has instructed, then out of that I will get a godly child. And I think there's those curveballs that come in that God says there are no formulas. Like these are the things that I've laid out that are best for you, and these are the things that I have prescribed. And yet simultaneously, he's still God and he's sovereign over all those things. And so I think when we're looking for a formula that if I do this, then I'm going to get this, we're always in danger of being disappointed because we're making it once again about us. And so as much as we want to say, well, yeah, it's about raising godly kids because that's what's going to honor God. So I want to do it to honor God. And I also want to make sure that they're walking with the Lord. That's not my choice to make. It's God who saves and not me. So you can do all the right things. Or in this case with Samuel, he's in a horrible environment, and yet God still saved him and used him.
Yeah, so this is a proverb, right? Not a formula, just like you said. And it doesn't mean that this will always happen, but it's a general piece of wisdom to train your children in the ways of God. And generally, they will stay faithful throughout their lives. But you're right, it's not a one-to-one promise.
Yeah, I think there's something about the proverb that we can turn toward some helpful instruction is if you do have Christian parents, that we can turn this to gratitude and say, that's a gift from God that I had parents that trained me in the things of God. So there's an opportunity there. I think as parents, it's an encouragement or a challenge to us that part of our role and responsibility is to train our children in the things of God. And there are also places in Scripture that we're told, children, obey your parents, and it will go well with you. I mean, there are some instructions to that too, that in obedience, generally speaking, when we're following the instruction of our parents who love us and care for us, that goes well for us. Always? No. Often? I think so. And so often, I think it's the case that as we train our children in the things of God, there's at least their eyes are open to that, and then we plead with God that he would work. And I was talking to somebody last night about this, that they're experiencing one of their children walking away, and I just and this person knew this, but just a reminder for all of us, God's not finished. The story's not over. There's hope there. So we keep praying, we keep loving, we keep instructing, and we watch God work.
Betty, do you have any parenting advice for anybody?
I have so much parenting advice. I'd have to have a different podcast. But
you can follow Betty on your favorite podcast.
One thing that I just thought of, like in talking about this, is it reminds me of the conversation we were having about prayer the other week. Of like, why would we ask the Lord for things if He's sovereign? In the same way of like, why would we instruct our kids in this way if like the Lord's sovereign over their hearts? But it's just what He's called us and instructed us to do, and we just see clearly throughout Scripture that this is like instruction that is received, and it's kind of like a natural cause and effect thing. Like the hope is if you're training your children in this way, that's the way in which they'll walk, but we don't know if that's true or not. But I don't know, it just reminded me of that we're still instructed regardless of if we know it's going to turn out this specific way.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think a temptation of every parent is to own the good that their children do. And so thinking, oh, my kid's really well behaved, that's a reflection on me. But I think we need to be cautious in that, because if we own the good, then we also need to own the bad. And so understanding that we need to be faithful to what God has called us to do, but ultimately our children are responsible for their choices and their behavior. And of course they grow and mature into that responsibility. But I don't know. I think for me, if I would be very tempted if all of my kids end up walking with the Lord and not going through seasons of doubt, I would be very tempted in my heart to probably say, well, I probably did something right there, rather than thanking God for his incredible mercy in bringing that to fruition.
I thought it was always that if our kids did something right, it was because they had you as a mom. And if they did something bad, it was because they had me as a dad.
It's a proverb, I think.
I think it is.
Somewhere. Last little topic I want to touch on. We've alluded sometimes more... what is the word?
Overtly?
Yes, thank you. This happens to me every time.
Flush it out, Eric.
Yeah.
Flush it out.
We've alluded sometimes overtly, sometimes... What's the other side of that?
Covertly.
Thank you.
Inadvertently?
Yeah. Of this theme of trusting God through this text. We're going to continue to see this. Help me tease that out. What are some ways, I can think of at least a few, that we see trust in God show up or be a piece of this text?
I mean, obviously, Hannah and Elkanah giving Samuel to the temple to be raised there by a group of ungodly men. I mean, there's clearly a trust that they know that God is going to care for their son in that. And I would say the converse would be, Phinehas and Hophni, and probably Eli, just a lack of trust in the way that God set stuff up and thinking, yeah, God set this up this particular way to do these things, and I'm not content with that, so I'm going to do it the way that I want to do it. And so I think that also shows a trust or lack thereof, more trust in self than in God.
I was going to say something unpopular that kind of goes against that a little bit. I think we also see some trust. This is all speculation. I think we see some trust in Eli that he would let go of the reins of the priesthood to his sons.
What do you mean?
I just think of anyone in a position of authority that's been called by God to do that, to let that go to anyone else is really hard. You feel called by God to do that. So to let go of that is probably, again, speculation, but a trust in God that he's going to take care of that. Now, it didn't go well, and that's not because God wasn't faithful. It's because his sons were, worthless men.
Do you think it was a trusting of God, or do you think it was
I
just
said it was speculation. You can't call me on it if I say it's speculation.
Do it, Kirsten.
I'm not calling you on it. I'm trying to dialogue. But could it be just an indifference? Like he was indifferent to their sin. He was indifferent to their character. And so, yeah, he trusted God enough to hold his own position. But with his sons, he was indifferent to their behavior. And so he wasn't willing to actually step into that.
Yeah, to a point, I think so. But there was a tipping point for him where he did see that his sons... where he says, "No, my sons, it is no good report that I hear." And he goes into how God is the mediator for them. If their sin is against someone else, but if it's against God, there's no hope for you. So I think there is a tipping point where he maybe he's indifferent, but there is a point at which he says, "Oh, hold on, this is too far." Anyway, okay, back to the question. Sorry, I took us a different direction. I told you it was going to be unpopular.
No, I was just thinking in my own parenting, like there's times that so there was one time years ago that two of our boys were wrestling. And I'm always standing on the side saying, guys, it's not going to end well. It's not going to end well.
I've been there.
It's not going to end well. And
Somebody's getting hurt.
Shockingly, it never ends well. But they just kept going and kept going. And Vince tried to intervene, and I tried to intervene, and they just would not listen. And so finally, Vince said, "Fine, have at it. We're done. Like, we have tried to give you counsel. We have tried to intervene, and you're not willing to listen, so go for it." And the way that it ended was that one of the boys picked up the other boy and threw his head through the drywall. And so and that actually kind of feels like what happened here with Eli. Like he's kind of like, he's tried to intervene, he's tried to give counsel, they're not willing to listen. And so finally he's like, fine, have at it. It's not mine to deal with anymore, it's God's. And so I don't know, it doesn't come across as much as trusting God, as more as like just a parent at his wit's end and just exhausted and like, I'm tired, I don't know what to do, so God's going to have to deal with you because you're unwilling to listen.
It's a good thing your son didn't hit a stud.
It is. They also got then go to Home Depot and buy patch kits with
Yeah,
their
good.
own money. And
They got to learn.
how
They got to learn how to
patch
do
the
some
wall.
drywall.
I hold my drywall at home right now because a knee went through it.
Yeah.
They were jumping from one floor onto the landing in our stairs and jumped a little too far.
Yeah. I think I'm going to get us back.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think we see, I'm fishing here, but I like to do this. I think we see trust in the prophet who trusts God to come to Eli and speak. I mean, that's hard to come to the priest and bring a word of rejection from God to a priest. That takes a deep trust in God.
Yeah, I think there's two other places where I think that I see it. One, it seems like the narrator is pointing to the reader that God is trustworthy, that he will be just. Like Hophni and Phinehas will be dealt with their sins. So he's not going to turn a blind eye. So that's one. And the other one is that we see Samuel, like these rays of hope, that like there is hope. Like God's still raising and still working in the midst of all of it. It isn't going to end with, and everything's horrible and dark in the end.
Yeah.
Betty, what do you see? Is there any themes of trust you see here?
Well, something was coming to mind, and it's probably not really about the theme of trust. But one thing I was just thinking of is like the position of the people, like as the priests that they're coming to for these sacrifices are doing it wrong and like withholding things or taking it for themselves, and they try to correct it, but then the correction doesn't work. Like, what do you do in that situation? Like, as the person who came to worship and you trying to bring correction to these priests who are ignoring you and like kind of threatening you too. And I don't know, just like still like what it looks like in that to like trust right worship in that instance. That's not really, I was trying really hard.
I think that's interesting to think about, that these people had to, at some level, they had to say, you know what? It's not about the leaders who are leading. It's about the worship of God. And I'm going to continue to worship God no matter what.
Yeah, so what are their options? Their options are, we don't go to the temple or the tabernacle anymore, or the tent of meeting. We're not going to participate. Or we are and know that it's not going to be according to what God called them to. I don't know if there's a third option yet or not. Betty, have you thought about your own question, how to answer it?
They probably just went to the other church. They went to First Baptist. Right. First Baptist down the road.
They'll go to the other tent of meeting.
Yeah.
I think that's believing, though, that God sees the intent of your heart and that you are doing the best that you know to be obedient. And even in that, you're still going to fall short, especially if the people that are mediating for you are not following the law and not obeying. And ultimately, then that points to Jesus and saying, we have a mediator who did it perfectly. And so I think when you see the weakness of the mediators here and knowing that the people had to be faithful to the best of their ability, and yet it still wasn't enough, and yet our mediator did it perfectly. And so we don't have to worry now about doing it perfectly anymore, because we have a mediator that did.
That's beautiful. I think we should end the podcast right there.
Yeah, I was going to say, that hits at verse 35. I will raise up, the prophet says, I will raise up for myself a faithful priest. And of course, he's talking about a priest who's coming. But we know, and I think there's probably some prophecy in that too, that there is a great and faithful priest who is coming. And that one will do according to what is in my heart and in my mind, God says, and I will build him a sure house forever, pointing forward.
So what here in this text raises your affections for a good God?
I think what I just said is that it just, the text shows the depravity of man and how incredibly hopeless it was without Jesus. And, you know, what Vince pointed to yesterday, Hebrews 4:14, since we have a great high priest who has passed through the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God, let us hold fast to our confession. And so knowing that we have a great high priest who did it perfectly, that we don't need to worry anymore about when our leaders sin. I mean, obviously we need to take it into consideration and be courageous and bold in calling that out. And yet at the same time, that does not affect our standing before God.
Yeah, same.
Pretty much same.
I'm tempted to say same, but I want to point, this is another piece, the gravity of the sin, but then the trustworthiness of God through it all. And we've talked about this a lot in this podcast. That raises my affections for a good God. His character is shining through despite the darkness of the story. I think we'll continue to see that here in 1 Samuel. It's a good God that we get to serve with a mediator who is perfect.
Well, and like Vince said yesterday, your story's not without hope. And even if it feels hopeless right now, there's a story that's being unraveled that you can't necessarily see. I don't imagine that Hannah and Elkanah or Samuel had any idea what God was up to. And so there is a hope of knowing that God is up to something, even when the story around us is incredibly dark and unrelenting in darkness.
Yeah, which is a whole other topic that we see how twisted humanity is here. And so we have this history recorded by another Israelite showing how messed up their priestly line was. This is humanity on display. It isn't, what's the word? Candy coated? Is that the word?
Sugar coated.
Oh my God, I'm going to stop. Thanks for listening to the AfterWord.
Chapter 3 next week.
Chapter 3 next week. We love you.
Bye.